He arrived in a remote seaside village, driven by whispers of a hidden cavern said to conceal ancient carvings. At the break of dawn, villagers glimpsed him scaling dangerous cliffs by lantern light. Then he vanished, leaving them desperate to know the cave's secret. Stay with us on Inspiring Stories. He tracks an ancient cave's secret, then vanishes at dawn. Days later, locals discover a strange path. Late at night, he scaled the rugged cliffs by lantern light, driven by rumors of a hidden cave that had baffled explorers for decades. Locals caught a glimpse of him at dawn, but before anyone could approach, he vanished without a trace, leaving them wondering what he discovered. Stay tuned to Inspiring Stories. Part 1. The story revolves around Oliver Fields, a traveling researcher fascinated by coastal legends. He arrives in the small seaside town of Briarwick and hears rumors of a long-lost cave containing cryptic carvings. A local fisherman swears he saw Oliver climbing toward the cliffs just hours before sunrise, only for Oliver to vanish at dawn. Part 2. Suspicion and curiosity grip the townsfolk. A young librarian named Naomi uncovers old diaries describing a mysterious map that points to hidden chambers. She begins to investigate, hoping to understand Oliver's whereabouts. Meanwhile, an older resident claims the sea itself may hold clues, suggesting the entrance is submerged at high tide. Part 3. Naomi enlists the help of two experienced cliff divers, Jonah and Eva, to explore the underwater side of the cavern. They discover newly cut rope marks on the rocks, evidence Oliver was there before them. As they search for answers, they encounter unexpected symbols etched into the limestone, hinting at a secret older than the town itself. Part 4. The community comes together to protect these fragile discoveries. They learn that the carvings describe an ancient ritual meant to preserve the coastline from erosion. Oliver's presence reveals a deeper mission. He came to prove the ritual's significance so future generations might carry on the tradition. Ultimately, Oliver reappears, helping confirm the carving's meaning, then quietly leaves Briarwick, urging Naomi to lead further research on her own. Oliver Fields arrived in Briarwick one chilly autumn evening, carrying just a canvas rucksack and a rolled parchment tucked beneath his arm. Despite the ocean's roar under a cloudy sky, he wore a look of quiet anticipation. The town itself was modest, though charming. A snug harbor ringed by fishing boats, a narrow main street lined with salt-stained cottages, and a single flickering lantern outside the harbor master's shack. Oliver took a moment to breathe in the tangy air before making his way toward the local inn. Beneath Briarwick's unassuming surface, he sensed a magnetism, something pulling him here, as though the sea winds had whispered secrets he alone could decipher. He introduced himself to Mrs. Whitcomb, the friendly innkeeper, and swiftly retired to his small room under the eaves. From his pack, he pulled out scattered pages of research notes, cross-referenced them with the parchment, and traced a faint route leading from the shore to a series of towering cliffs. Every reference pointed to a cave system few locals dared to explore. Oliver's pen scratched across paper late into the night, his eyes alight with excitement each time he found matching details between his notes and older accounts of an uncharted cavern. The knowledge he possessed was incomplete, but it was enough to guide him toward the crucial step. At dawn the next morning, Oliver left the inn quietly, paying no attention to the brewing chatter among fishermen setting off on their boats. One fisherman, Everett, happened to spot him climbing the steep trail that wound up the side of the cliff. The path was half hidden by brambles and salt bush, seldom used. Everett shouted a greeting, but Oliver either didn't hear or chose not to respond. Within moments, the mysterious visitor disappeared around a rocky outcrop, leaving Everett shaking his head in bewilderment. Hours later, the fisherman returned with his daily catch, only to find that Oliver seemed to have vanished into thin air. The innkeeper said he hadn't come back. No footprints led away from the cliffs. Intrigued, Everett told a few of his neighbors, who were equally puzzled. Word spread that a stranger had climbed up to the cliffs at dawn and simply faded into the landscape. One might have dismissed the tale as gossip if it weren't for the bits of rope, scraps of parchment, and oddly shaped chalk pieces found near the cliff edge. Someone had clearly been studying the site in detail. Naomi, the town's quietly determined librarian, heard the rumors while shelving books in the musty corner of Briarwick's small library. She'd lived here her whole life, venturing little beyond the outskirts of the nearest port city, but her love for reading had expanded her world. She was intimately familiar with legends of hidden tunnels, sunken ships, and ghostly beacons that peppered the local lore. The story of a stranger scaling the cliffs awakened her curiosity. During her lunch break, Naomi retrieved an old diary she'd once stumbled upon during a reorganization project. The entries were penned by a traveling naturalist over a century ago. Those yellowed pages included mention of the great cave above the tide line and hinted at ancient runes scrawled onto the walls. Naomi skimmed the text quickly, her pulse accelerating whenever she found references matching Oliver's rumored climb. It seemed the diary also recounted a complex network of passageways rumored to run beneath the very cliffs. Some passages opened only when the water level receded at the lowest tides, a phenomenon rare in this part of the coast. The deeper she read, the more she became convinced that Oliver's disappearance was tied to the labyrinth of rock formations described in the old text. She decided to talk to Everett, hoping he might confirm details of the stranger's route. Together, they started piecing together a timeline, though they were still left with more questions than answers. That night, a powerful windstorm battered the coast, churning the sea into a frothy maelstrom. Many in Briarwick barricaded windows and stoked fires, huddling indoors to ride out the sudden onslaught. Between gusts, Naomi peered through the library's shutters toward the cliffs. She wondered if Oliver might still be out there somewhere, trapped by the storm. The idea gnawed at her, and she resolved to do whatever she could come morning. With the skies calmer at dawn, Naomi ventured up the narrow trail herself, carefully navigating loose stones and bristly undergrowth. She discovered what looked like anchor points hammered into the rock, evidence of someone climbing or rappelling deeper into the crags. She also noticed that part of the cliff face seemed hollow, a faint echo carrying back when she tapped on it. However, no clear entrance was visible, only a craggy surface slick with sea spray. Picturing Oliver with rope in hand, Naomi wondered if he'd found a hidden chasm or a natural crevice that led into the rumored network of caves. Meanwhile, halfway across town, a local named Leonard rummaged through his grandfather's old trunk. He was the sort of person who collected stories and artifacts, always rummaging in the dim attic for clues about Briarwick's past. He found a brass compass, tarnished but still functional, alongside an oilskin map that showed incomplete outlines of the sea cliffs. Intrigued, Leonard brought these items to Naomi, who gasped upon seeing the map's faint scribbles. It bore a resemblance to the diary's sketches, lines that hinted at an underwater corridor connecting to a partially submerged cave entrance. They realized then that Oliver might have used some version of this map to plan his route. Fueling her determination, Naomi reached out to two adventurous spirits in Briarwick, Jonah and Eva, experienced cliff divers who occasionally led daredevil expeditions. Their skill in navigating rocky shorelines was unmatched in town. She showed them the map and explained her suspicions that Oliver had either found a way into the cave or was still trapped inside. Jonah, who thrived on adrenaline, was instantly hooked. Eva, more cautious, hesitated but eventually agreed, aware that time could be critical. The tides in this region could quickly flood any submerged passages. They set out at low tide, traveling light. Jonah carried diving gear, while Eva carried an inflatable raft in case they needed to explore a partially flooded chamber. Naomi stayed on the ledge above, ready to relay signals with a flashlight should they need anything from the surface. As Jonah and Eva descended into the swirling waters at the base of the cliff, the sun glinted on the waves, making everything shimmer with a hypnotic beauty that belied the danger below. Slipping beneath the surface, Jonah felt a surge of excitement. Underwater, the rocky outcropping gave way to a narrow opening, just wide enough for a single person to swim through. They moved slowly, cautious of hidden currents or jagged protrusions. To their relief, the opening led into a small air pocket inside the cliff, a pocket that expanded into a surprisingly large chamber. They broke the surface, gasping in awe. Stalagmites and stalactites glimmered where stray beams of light squeezed through cracks above, and a shelf of rock near the chamber's rear looked recently disturbed. Eva noticed a pair of footprints leading from the water's edge to a dark tunnel winding deeper into the cliff. She and Jonah exchanged glances. Oliver had to be here, or at least he had been. They pressed onward, using waterproof headlamps to illuminate the path. The tunnel twisted and turned, occasionally opening into side caverns. Strange markings were carved into the walls, arrows, geometric shapes, in swirling patterns reminiscent of archaic scripts. It was captivating, if a bit eerie. Further in, they discovered scraps of cloth, likely torn from someone's shirt as he squeezed through a narrow passage. Jonah's eyes widened in recognition. The fabric resembled the color of Oliver's rumored clothing. Encouraged, they continued. Back in Briarwick, word spread that Naomi and the divers had ventured after the missing man. Some in the community frowned upon such a risky undertaking, while others quietly applauded it. The day passed with no news, and the once friendly breeze started turning cold as evening approached. Naomi fought the urge to worry, reminding herself that Jonah and Eva were experts who knew how to stay safe. Meanwhile, she pored over every historical record she had: diaries, letters, even random scribbles. One letter contained a vague note about an ancient custom involving a celestial alignment within the cave. Once or twice a year, sunlight would pierce through a fissure at dawn, illuminating the carvings. Could Oliver have been there for that very event? And if so, had he succeeded? At last, as the moon rose, Jonah and Eva emerged, damp and exhausted, at the foot of the cliffs. They brought unsettling news. There were signs that someone had not only explored the main cavern, but had gone deeper than they could safely venture in a single day. Strange diagrams were etched into a newly cleared section, as though Oliver had tried to interpret the prehistoric symbols. Even more intriguing, they found small containers of chalk dust near an altar-like ledge. It appeared Oliver might have been making rubbings or tracings of the stone carvings, but there was no trace of the man himself. Despite not locating Oliver, Jonah and Eva returned with enough evidence to confirm that the cave was vast, perhaps even more extensive than local folklore suggested. They relayed every detail to Naomi, whose eyes shone with both excitement and anxiety. She shared her theory about the dawn alignment, which would happen again in just a couple of days. They speculated that Oliver might be waiting for that window to decipher more of the symbols or to confirm the significance of the place. Or worse, if he were trapped somewhere in the depths without a working flashlight, he could be disoriented in the dark, surviving only on the water trickling through the cave walls. Determined to help, Briarwick's townsfolk gathered whatever supplies they could spare for a more thorough expedition: lanterns, ropes, medical kits, and portable radios. This time a small group formed: Jonah, Eva, Naomi, and Leonard, intending to camp inside the initial chamber. They reached the rocky cove at low tide and squeezed through to the hidden cavern, establishing a makeshift base. Guided by carefully placed glow sticks, they followed Oliver's possible route deeper and deeper. The labyrinth seemed endless, with side tunnels branching off unpredictably. Occasionally, they heard distant echoes of dripping water or strange breezes that suggested new openings. Finally, at the point where they had to crawl on hands and knees through a tight corridor, they found Oliver. He was worn out, his clothes tattered, but his eyes sparked with relief when he spotted them. Holding a small notebook covered in cryptic diagrams, he explained how he had slipped through an even narrower crack while chasing a stray beam of sunlight that illuminated the carvings. A sudden rock shift behind him had cut off his return path. Realizing the path was blocked, he had spent days trying to find another exit. Overjoyed to see living souls, Oliver shared what he had learned. The carvings told the tale of an ancient coastal civilization that performed yearly ceremonies to stabilize the land and protect against sea encroachment. Their knowledge of tides, star alignments, and geology had guided them for generations. In the most remote cavern, Oliver discovered a unique artifact shaped like a massive prism. At dawn on specific dates, the rising sun shone through a small fissure, passing through this prism and casting an array of symbols onto the cave walls, a prehistoric projector of sorts, revealing instructions or prophecies that had yet to be fully understood. Together, they retraced Oliver's steps. With Jonah's rope skills and Eva's diving expertise, they found a route to bypass the shifted rocks. Leonard marveled at the prism, carefully sketching its geometry in his own notebook. Naomi realized that the diaries, the letter mentioning celestial alignment, and Oliver's discoveries all fit together like pieces of a grand puzzle. The plan was to return at dawn to see the prism's effect for themselves and record every detail. Oliver, weakened and dehydrated, allowed them to guide him back to the main chamber where they had set up camp. He slept soundly, confident that his findings would soon be revealed to the community. At dawn, a golden shaft of light pierced the cave through a near-invisible crack high above. It struck the prism, scattering a kaleidoscope of refracted beams onto the walls. Lines glowed in mesmerizing patterns, forming shapes and symbols that seemed alive. The group watched, spellbound, as archaic markings flickered into view in the illuminated portion of the cavern. Naomi snapped photos, Leonard sketched furiously, and Jonah and Eva simply stood in awe. Oliver, leaning on a makeshift walking stick, had tears in his eyes. He dreamed of this moment for so long that he could scarcely believe it was happening. Word eventually reached Briarwick, and a handful of locals braved the treacherous route to witness the spectacle. In hushed amazement, they discussed how these discoveries might transform their understanding of the region's history. The cave became a symbol of what people could achieve together when curiosity overcame fear. Of course, there were practical concerns, ensuring safety, preserving the fragile environment, and organizing further research. But for now, exhilaration reigned supreme. Even the older folks who had once dismissed the legends as fancy tales realized they stood on the threshold of something extraordinary. Once Oliver had recovered and ensured the artifacts were documented, he did something that took everyone by surprise. He quietly slipped out of town. No farewells, no announcements, just a brief note left in Mrs. Whitcomb's ledger at the inn, thanking Briarwick for its kindness. In the note, he wrote that the knowledge he'd uncovered belonged to everyone, not just him, and that he trusted Naomi and her companions to carry on the work responsibly. He hinted at future expeditions elsewhere, referencing other coastal regions rumored to have similar hidden wonders. As dawn broke on another crisp morning, the townspeople realized Oliver was gone, leaving behind the new maps, sketches, and the profound sense that they had become part of a greater tapestry of discovery. In the weeks that followed, Naomi, Jonah, Eva, and Leonard formed a small research group dedicating their free time to studying the carvings and planning how best to share the findings with historians and archaeologists. They hoped to preserve the site, ensuring it remained a place of learning rather than a hotspot for reckless adventurers. The entire community pitched in, whether by cooking meals for the researchers or forging safer paths along the cliffs. Briarwick, once simply a sleepy fishing town, now radiated a sense of purpose. Through it all, Oliver's quiet departure lingered in everyone's mind. His disappearance mirrored the stories that had first brought him to the cliffs. Yet the traces of his journey were everywhere, in the mapped caverns, in the hearts of those who had ventured beneath the waves, and in the sudden bursts of inspiration that seemed to grip the entire town. Over time, rumors circulated of him appearing in distant coastal villages, investigating more hidden tunnels, or standing at the edge of some remote precipice at sunrise. But no one could confirm these sightings. Much like the ancient secrets he'd chased, Oliver Fields existed on the boundary between known and unknown, prompting others to look beyond their ordinary routines. In the end, Naomi realized that perhaps the greatest discovery wasn't just the cave or its mesmerizing prism. It was the realization that the world was still filled with mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Briarwick's humble streets had become a stage for extraordinary events simply because a stranger had dared to follow an old legend. And in doing so, he'd left a legacy of curiosity and unity that would endure far longer than any physical artifact. If you ever find yourself wandering near those rugged cliffs, you might sense echoes of Oliver's footsteps or catch sight of a faint glow at dawn. And who knows, if you're bold enough to follow that glow, you might just uncover a piece of the tale he left behind.